everyone, welcome back into Cherry Picking for today's episode. Last episode was must-add for Week 9, so be sure to check that out if you haven't seen it already. I told you guys to add Pyotr Kochetkov. Didn't have the greatest start. The Canes did end up losing to the Ducks on Tuesday night, but that's all right. We're on to this video, which honestly a little bit different, much more informative in my opinion. So let me know, subscribe, like if you guys like it, and let me know in the comments if you guys have anything to change or if you just plain simple just don't like it at all. So I'm going to be looking at prime player matchups and who you should be targeting against three of probably right now the worst defensive teams in terms of lack of possession, chances against, and then just goals allowed. So today we're going to be looking at the Anaheim Ducks, Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Vancouver Canucks, and just looking at their next three games starting on Friday, December 9th, and then moving forward. And I'm going to give you three types of players that you could target there. So the first player being kind of the star player, and a player, if you are in the NHL betting market, a guy you could target for shots on goal is becoming one of the more popular markets in the NHL betting segments right now. So definitely good to see where the matchups lie, or the good matchups lie. And then also a must start for a player playing against this team. So a guy who's been hot, a guy who's a good track record against this team, and then the last one being a streamer. So if you need to pick up a guy for a day, or a couple days, I guess you could say, there will be a guy that I'll be featuring who's 20% rostered and lower, I would say. Some guy you could pick up and slot into your roster and just do that because he has a good matchup. So the first team we're going to be looking at is the Anaheim Ducks. They've been easily the worst team so far this year. Their record might not indicate it because obviously it's still earlier in the season. There are some teams that have 6 or 7 wins like the Ducks, but just all their analytics and their metrics are very bad. So looking at the graphic there, we're having Corsi percentage, 28th in the NHL, 45%. The goals against, 31st at around 69. Obviously, these numbers are going to change a little bit because the length of this video will go on for about a week. And then their expected goals per 60, though, dead last in the NHL at 3.2. And then shots on goal against, also dead last with about 800 shots against so far this year. And this is all these numbers are 5-on-5, so you can exclude power play numbers, but I will get into that as well. So the first matchup that they're playing on Friday against the San Jose Sharks. So the first player we're going to be looking at, the star player, and the guy you're going to be target for shots on goal is Timo Meier, left winger. Kind of a no-brainer here. If you do bet on these player shot totals, you'll know that he is one of the guys who shoots the most in the NHL. I think he had the most shot attempts in the NHL last year. The Ducks allowed the second most shots on goal to left wingers this season. Tons of scoring chances. Timo Meier averaging about 8 shot attempts per game this year, translating to about 5 shots on goal per game. This can easily be laddered if you're on one of the sports books that does offer the ability to take a higher or an alt total for shot props. There's definitely a couple of them out there. Definitely try to take him over. His market is usually around 5.5 or 4.5, but you could take that up to, I would say, 6 or 7 against this Ducks team. Like we've seen guys get up to 10 shots on goal so far this season. So, and by the way, the links for all these sports books will be in the description below to sign up. So be sure to check those out. If you are looking to sign up at a new book and one of the better NHL books, I'll be sure to mention those in the description. The next guy, the must start for this game, is Logan Couture, center on the San Jose Sharks. He's played, honestly, his best hockey, no question about it, against the Ducks in his career. He has 22 goals, 20 assists in 56 games, tied with the Canucks for the most goals that he has against a single team so far this year, in his whole career. They give up a ton of shots to center, the most shots to center so far this season. So same as the whole thing, the narrative with Timo Meier and the left winger, kind of riding out that same thing here. And then just looking at his recency, he has 4 goals, 11 points his last 10 games. So Logan Couture is definitely the must start there. And then the streamer, a guy I'd pick up and put in here, plays left wing and right wing in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues, and that's Luke Kunin, 11% rostered right now. He has the 4th highest expected goals on the team. He plays on the 3rd line, but he does center that second power play. And the one thing here, the Ducks take the 3rd most penalties, most goals against on the penalty kill at 5-on-4 situations. So with Kunin having a couple power play goals so far this year, he could be a sneaky play on the Sharks. So those are 3 guys I would target when the Ducks play the Sharks on December 9th. Moving on to the next matchup, they play the Senators on December 12th. So the star player and the player we're going to be targeting for shots on goal, Brady Tkachuk, left winger. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of left wingers, centers, and even defensemen targeted when you're playing against the Ducks is probably the good thing to do. So as I mentioned, very susceptible to left wingers, allowing 8 shots per game to that position. Tkachuk had 7 shot attempts, or is averaging 7 shot attempts per game right now, 4.5 shots on goal. And over the course of his career, he's averaging about 5 shots on goal against the Ducks as well. So definitely a good number there. He had 8 and 7 in his last 2 starts. So same thing as Timo. I think we climbed the ladder here. We find the top. Try to go as high as you can, depending on what sportsbook you have, because I think, like I said, very advantageous matchup here. The must start for me is going to be Alex DeBrincat. He's also a left winger. We thought Couture had good and efficient numbers against the Ducks. This guy's even better. Smaller sample size, but still 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points in 13 games against the Ducks. 13 career games, he has 21 points, so almost a goal per game, which is pretty wild. He has 11 power play points this season, and I mentioned Ducks' 3rd most penalty minutes in the NHL so far this year. One of the worst penalty kills. And right now, Alex DeBrincat only has 6 goals on the season, but his expected goals is at 11. So I think he's about to burst onto the scene. The Ducks could really be the matchup that he does that. And then the streamer, a guy that I bet on to win the Calder, who I think honestly might not win it just because he was super hot at the beginning of the year, but Shane Pinto, 10% rostered, playing on a line with DeBrincat, so you get those residuals there, residual assists, or just scoring opportunities in general. He has 9 goals this season. A lot of them came at the beginning, as I mentioned, but still 3rd on the team. And with a team that gives up 14 to 15 shots per game to centers, I think this could be a good play as well, kind of like the Luke Kunin play with San Jose. All right, the last matchup that we're going to be looking at for this Ducks team, they play the Toronto Maple Leafs on December 13th. So the star player, guy we're going to be targeting for shots on goal. Again, most of the time, this is going to be a no-brainer, but I like to give you guys the stats just to see why these guys are so good and why this is such a good matchup for them. And that's Austin Matthews, center, obviously on the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the best players in the NHL. I just don't overthink it. He shoots the puck a ton. He's averaging, same as Timo Meier, kind of 8 shot attempts per game, around 4 shots on goal per game. So that's a little bit lower than his number last year. So he's still taking the same number of volume of shots, but just not getting them on goal just yet. And at home versus Anaheim in his career, his 5 games played, 4 goals, 6 assists. 4 goals, 6 assists, so 10 points. So also similar to what we've seen with Alex DeBrincat, actually. And so another guy that you could definitely play, star player on this Toronto Maple Leafs team that will just flourish against this Ducks team that's just poverty defensive-wise. The must start for me is John Tavares. Honestly, so far this year, I just talked about Austin Matthews, but this have been the duo so far this season. John Tavares and Mitch Marner have been great. John Tavares, 11 goals, 13 assists in 21 games played against the Ducks with a 15% shooting percentage. So those are also very good numbers we're seeing. And this is one of the best seasons we're seeing John Tavares have, especially in the last 3 years or even joining the Maple Leafs. He's 4th in expected goals in the NHL right now, and I think his ceiling is going to continue to grow this season. And then the last guy we're going to be talking about here is a streamer, and we're going to look at Rasmus Sandin, defenseman on the Toronto Maple Leafs, 22% rostered. Haven't talked about the fact that the Ducks are susceptible to D-men as well. Injuries have just plagued this D-core, but the opportunity is there for Rasmus Sandin. He's now playing on the first power play in Morgan Rielly's role, and he's playing over 21 minutes in 5 of his last 6 games. So he's getting more shots on net. He's definitely more involved in the offensive game plan, and at only 22% rostered, D-men go down all the time on your fantasy hockey team, so this is definitely a guy that you could slot in. All right, so the next team that we're going to be targeting for player matchups for fantasy hockey and even sports betting in general is going to be the Columbus Blue Jackets. So just running through some of their stats, they're a little bit better than the Ducks, but not by a big margin, and their team has been... They can kind of have an excuse because their team has been plagued with injuries. Laine has been out here and there. Werenski's out for the season. You have some other depth guys on D, and then even on forward, guys like Justin Danforth and a couple other guys have just been in and out of the IR, to be honest. So the first team that they're playing on Friday are the Flames, December 9th, and the player we're going to target might sound a little weird, but Noah Hannafin on the Calgary Flames, defenseman on the first pair next to Rasmus Andersson. He has been great against Columbus in his career, and Columbus gives up the most shots on goal to defensemen so far this year. But he has 4 goals, 8 assists in 17 games played with a 12% shooting percentage against a team that does, obviously, like I mentioned, give up a lot of opportunities, but he has never really been in that range of that high of a shooting percentage. So he comes to play when he plays Columbus. And looking at his numbers this year, he's averaging about 5 shots on goal per game, or shot attempts per game, 2.6 shots on goal per game. His market is usually set around 2.5 or 2, so I think this number is definitely gettable if you're looking to bet over his shot total. And then, as I mentioned, Columbus giving the most scoring opportunities, shots on goal to defensemen so far this year. This is a must play for me and a must bet, so I'll be betting this as well, and you should too. And then the next guy must start. We're going to be looking at a center, Nazem Kadri. Columbus gives up the 8th most shots to center so far this year. And just looking at Kadri's stats against Columbus in his career, he has 10 goals, 11 assists in 21 games played. And looking at his shooting percentage, also very important, like we did with Hanifin, around 16.5%. He also leads the Flames in expected goals, but he hasn't hit that in actual goals yet. So I think his bubble will burst against this Columbus team. He has a point in 6 straight and 9 total points in those games against Columbus. So he's rolling against the Blue Jackets, and I'm sure it'll continue when they play them on Friday. And then the streamer here, Dylan Dubé, center. Probably a lot of you might not have heard of this kid. He's not huge, obviously, on fantasy rosters, but a guy that you definitely slot in when you have a matchup that's this advantageous. He has 5 points in his last 4 games. He had 3 against Florida, who allows a lot of production from centers, so that's good to look at as well. Look at other teams that have given up a lot of shots, a lot of goals, a lot of points to centers, and try to match that up, try to pick guys up on the waiver wire, especially when you're streaming. He's playing with Kadri and Mangiapane right now, so 2 guys that have had success against Columbus in the past. As I mentioned with DeBrincat and Shane Pinto, get those residual assists, those residual scoring opportunities, could find one in the back of the net. And he's 5th on the team in expected goals, and he has increased ice time in the last 3 games as well. So I think this is definitely a good opportunity to play Dylan Dubé, and if you want to keep him on your team, I have no problem with that either. The next matchup we're going to be targeting here is when the Columbus Blue Jackets play the LA Kings on December 11th. So the first guy we're going to be looking at, Kevin Fiala, for our shot total prop. His market's usually set around 2.5, but this guy's awesome. I mean, we saw Minnesota, especially Matt Boldy, really kind of struggle at the beginning of the year without Kevin Fiala. I think his absence, Dean Evison really had to shake around what they were doing. They were relying a lot on Kirill Kaprizov, and now Fiala, we're starting to see him come into his own in this new LA team. This guy's volume continues to increase. He's averaging around 4 shot attempts per game, 2.5 shots on goal. So like I mentioned, his market's right around there. But when you have a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets who give up a lot of shots, this is where you want to target these kind of guys and these kind of matchups. You look at his last few games too, like I mentioned with his volume, 7 shot attempts, 6 shot attempts, 6 shot attempts, 8 shot attempts. So that's his last 4 games. So he's getting the volume. He just needs to get pucks on net. And then he's also dominated Columbus in most recent history. He has 3 goals, 7 assists in 8 games played, so 10 points in 8 games, and he's averaging just under 4 shots on goal against Columbus in his career. The must start that we're looking at is actually Sean Durzi, the defenseman on the LA Kings. This is one of my breakout players this year, and we're starting to see this guy break out on this LA Kings team. He's very offensive. He could pretty much do it all. Todd McClellan loves this guy. He leads defensemen in points with 18. He has 4 goals and 14 assists. Columbus, as we mentioned many a times, most shots, most scoring opportunities for defensemen. So you really want to look at a guy like Sean Durzi here. And he has 9 points in his last 6 games. So I think Sean Durzi is definitely a guy that you have to start when they're rolling up against Columbus here. The streamer here, I love this kid. He was one of my must-adds a couple of weeks ago, and I still think if he is on your waiver wire, he's a guy you can add and keep on your team, and that's Arthur Kaliev. Right winger, he's 16% rostered. He's now playing on the first line with Kopitar and Fiala. His ice time is trending from about 12 minutes. We're seeing him play about 14 minutes now, which is awesome. He has the highest expected goals for per 60 on the team, and he averages about 3 shots on goal per game over his last 5. So now he's getting the opportunities, and he's making the most of it. So definitely, if you have the opportunity to stream this kid, or even in DFS lineups, he'll be a very cheap option. Play him. So the last team that Columbus plays in this stretch of good matchups, Florida Panthers. December 13th, this is a nightmare matchup for the Blue Jackets, to be honest. We're looking at a guy like Matt Tkachuk, right winger. He's been one of the hottest shot targets so far this season on this new team. He's averaging 7 shot attempts per game, 4 shots on goal per game. Even though it's not the best position to target for Columbus, you can't not play this guy and attack his prop against a team that overall allows, if you include power play opportunities and penalty kill opportunities, close to 40 shots on goal per game. And their goalies are not good. And we're looking at 6 points last 3 games, and then 8 goals and 2 assists, 10 points in 10 games played against Columbus as well. He scored in 7 straight games against Columbus. So this guy must start for his shot prop. And then also, I think if you want to tackle an anytime goal scorer prop as well, I would definitely advocate for that too. So then Sam Bennett is our must start. I'm not going to tell you guys, obviously, Matt Tkachuk isn't going to be the must start or the top player every week. I want to give you guys a couple options that you can look at. So Sam Bennett, a guy that I'm actually high on right now, a guy I'm telling people to buy low on because he was just not He was creating a lot of scoring opportunities, but he just wasn't putting the puck in the back of the net. So he has the third highest expected goals rate on his team at 10.7. His shooting percentage is still very low. We've seen it much higher at different points of his career, especially when he's been at Florida, but it's trending in the right direction. He has 5 points in the last 2 games, and similar to Mr. Tkachuk, since being a member of the Panthers, he has 5 goals in 6 games against Columbus. Centers on the team shoots the most. Columbus gives up the 8th most shots to centers, so I mean, he's definitely a guy that you have to start this week, or against Columbus. And the streamer, so this is a little bit of a situation here where it's tough to say because it's hard to predict the future and where these guys are going to end up in the lineup. But Anton Lundell has been out of the last 2 games with not a very serious injury, so I think by December 13th he will be back. But if that's not the case, then you have to start Eetu Luostarinen, who I think is also a very good option. Both these guys' expected goals rate is at about the same mark. We're looking about 5 or 6. They both have about 15 points on the season as well. Both of these guys, Lundell rostered 25 to 35%, Luostarinen very much lower. Because if you're looking at Barkov being hurt and Lundell being hurt, Luostarinen goes up to that second line center. So that's huge. So if both those guys are out, Luostarinen is an awesome stream. He's like 2% rostered in most leagues. So you'll definitely be able to put that guy in your lineup if you can. And even in same thing as I mentioned before with Kaliev, DFS lineups, these guys are very advantageous to use. So definitely try to get them in there. So the last team we're going to be targeting for good player matchups this week is the Vancouver Canucks. Let's just look at some of their numbers. Corsi percentage, 25th at 47%. Goals against, 29th with 65. Expected goals against per 60, 29th in the NHL at just under 3, and then shots on goal against, they're 30th, allowing the same thing as Columbus and Anaheim, around 35 to 34 shots against per game. The first game they got is against the Minnesota Wild on December 10th. That's on Saturday, and Kirill Kaprizov comes to play when he plays the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, he's played 4 games against this team in his career, in his short career in the NHL. He has 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. I mean, it's just that simple. And his shot volume is out of control as well. 5 shots on goal in those 4 games, or averaging 5 shots on goal in those 4 games as well. It's hard not to have this guy as your star player and a guy to target for shots on goal as well. He just is the one guy on this Minnesota Wild team, without Fiala now too, that is getting the most treadway, especially on the power play too. So he is a guy that you should be targeting. You could look at his ladder for shots on goal as well to target. I wonder who's going to be in nets for the Canucks, but the good thing about taking shots on goal, they don't actually need to score. He just needs to get the pucks to the net. So the next guy, the must start, is Matt Boldy, right winger on the Wild. They give up the most shots on goal and scoring opportunities to right wingers in the NHL. Second in high danger chances on this team as well, Matt Boldy. Again, one of the guys who's a must-add, a buy low for me a couple weeks ago, and he's starting to show it as well. He has 3 goals, 7 points in his last 6 games, and he's second in shot attempts on the team with 127, but just 67 shots on goal. So I think he'll start to find a way to get the pucks actually on the net instead of missing the net or getting them blocked. The streamer for this game is a defenseman, Kalen Addison, a guy also I've really liked. Really tore it up in the dub with Lethbridge before. This is pretty much his full season. We saw him last year at the tail end of the season kind of get a little bit more time in this depth chart on this roster. But this year, he's quarterbacking the first power play. He has 2 goals, 14 assists. He leads all defensemen on this team in assists. And his on-ice goals percentage is 60. So he's on the ice. They're creating scoring opportunities. So this is a guy I think you have to start in this situation. 12% rostered. Definitely a sneaky play. So the next matchup for the Canucks is the Calgary Flames on December 14th. And the player we're going to be targeting for shots on goal is Tyler Toffoli. This guy, like Kaprizov, a little bit more volume, but he is a Canuck killer. Almost a point per game at 40 games against the Canucks. He has 21 goals, 14 assists, 35 points in his career against this team. We saw him when he was on Montreal, when they're in the bubble and playing Canadian teams all the time. Toffoli just ransacked this Canucks team all the time. He's averaging this season 5 shot attempts per game, 3 shots on goal per game. His market will have him at about 2.5, so you could definitely bet on the over there. And then he has 9 multi-point games against the Canucks, and he's gone over 2.5 shots on goal in 24 of the 40 games. So you can take his shot totals, or you could even go with a point prop for Toffoli in this game. I like either of them equally. The must start for me is Andrew Mangiapane, also a right winger. You really want to exploit these matchups with the right wingers when looking at the Canucks. He doesn't have the same amount of pizzazz as Toffoli against the Canucks, but he does have 10 career goals against them. His shooting percentage is like 25%, so he's not shooting at a high volume against his team, but he's making it efficient and he's producing at a really high level. He has 3 goals in the last 4 games, so with Mangiapane, he's more of a boom or bust for a goal, but I still think he's a must start in this situation, keeping the centers out of it, because Canucks allow the 5th fewest shots to centers so far this season. So I would leave Kadri out, try to go with guys like Mangiapane, Toffoli, some guys on the wing, and even maybe some defensemen as well. And then looking at the last guy, the streamer for this game, is going to be Adam Ruzicka, 6% rostered right now. This guy's been pretty hot as late and very quietly. I don't think anyone's really talking about him. Coming out of the Czech, he's a 99, hasn't had too much experience in the NHL, but he played juniors in North America as well. So he's 5 points his last 5 games. With how cheap he'll be in DFS against a team that really hasn't been able to figure it out with a really bad goalie, I really think that guy is a sneaky option that you could take here. He has some of the highest expected goals percentage over the last 3 games on the Flames. So he's really creating more scoring opportunities for himself on a lower amount of ice time than some of these top players on the Flames. You look at the games like the Capitals and the Coyotes where he did net one. I think this guy is a very sneaky option to play when you're going up against the Canucks. All right, the last matchup for this Canucks team that we're going to be looking at is the Winnipeg Jets on December 17th. So the player we're going to be looking at for shots on goal, it's actually Blake Wheeler. Might be a little bit surprising, but you strip the C and he'll give you a reason to regret it, because he's been having a much better year than we've seen the last 2 years at least. He's 3rd in points on the team with 22, so almost a point per game this year. He's 2nd in assists. His shot volume isn't insanely high, I'll be honest, 4 to 5 shot attempts per game, but he's getting 2 or 3 on net, and against the Canucks in the past, he's been able to get that shot total up, and he has a lot of volume against the Canucks, playing in the Western Conference pretty much his whole career. And it's just such a good matchup. He has 8 points his last 4 games, and as I mentioned, over his last 10 games against the Canucks, he's averaging about 3 shots on goal. The must start for this is honestly a no-brainer. I kind of switched these two. It's Kyle Connor, just because he plays on the left wing. Canucks have been a little bit more stingy against left wingers, but Kyle Connor has been so good as of late. He's 2 goals in his most recent game. Very high expected goals total. Hasn't hit that yet in his actual goals total, but I think we'll see him get there. I think this is the season we'll see Kyle Connor get to about 90 points, maybe even 100 points. So I think he's a must start, obviously. And then the streamer, Cole Perfetti, this rookie, he's battling for the Calder race, obviously. A guy that maybe had a little bit of a slower start, but starting to come into his own. We could see that in his percentages owned on Yahoo Leagues. It was around 14% a couple weeks ago, and now it's up to 22%. So he's definitely becoming a little bit more popular as he continues to score. So that's another guy that you can look at to play against the Canucks. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think of this new style format for cherry picking. I'd love to do this kind of stuff, so I'll do it in the future. If you guys do enjoy it, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, join the Discord, and I will see you guys next time.